Now we'd like to turn to David Schultz for his build along of the All Nation Waffle Side Boxcar. David, welcome.
Thanks, Jim. Well, welcome back everybody to northern Minnesota, where many were cold, but few are frozen. Anyway, we're gonna tackle this boxcar. Hopefully everybody is where we left off last week. If not, you can go back, watch the other videos. So anyway, there's what the finished product is gonna look like. I was gonna give you a little bit of history about the car, but most I could find out was they started building these in like the late 60s. And the best I could learn was it apparently started with Press Steel Car Company started making these. And the idea was that you could put the load right up against the side of the boxcar and still be able to reach into those pockets and get the load locks. Where before they had to put the load a little bit away from the wall to get to the load locks. This way they could dig in there and grab them, and it became very popular. Pullman, of course, got involved along with everybody else who was building, and they were quite a popular car for almost anything. But anyway, that's most of that. So anyway, everybody should be about here. Got the parts all cleaned up, ready to go. You got those center sections. That's where the door will cover those up eventually. You've got the floor and the ends cleaned up, and we're ready to start assembling this thing. So first thing you need to do, and I didn't do it, I glued this end on before I did this, but you should drill for whatever truck screw you're going to use. I used 440. That it's right into that little pocket into these. You have to do a little cleanup to get the nut to fit down in there. If you're going to put in the floor, if you bought the more expensive kit, you get the nailable steel floor. So you might have to gouge that out a little bit with a Dremel to get the nut to sit down in there far enough so it doesn't interfere with the floor. But anyway, then put in whatever nut you're going to use. And I would recommend that you cover it with something, a piece of plastic, or whatever. That way, if you seal the car up tight, the nut will never fall out of there. Otherwise, it could break and fall out, and then you're going to end up ripping the roof off to get that nut back in its place. Here we are. We got a square. Put the floor on there. You got the notch cleaned up, and a little super glue. Clamp it up, and you'll get your ends to be square. Try to keep these as absolutely square as you can. I realize the wall, the end, it might bow a little bit one way or the other, but once we glue the sides on, we'll be able to take that out of it. But try to keep this stuff as square as possible. You can use the wood blocks, or you can use the steel square that I have along with these clamps. All right, this piece here where the little flanger up sign is pointing, that's where we're going to put the glue on this piece when we glue the sides on. Now, one of the things you're going to want to do is after you get the sides on, is just assemble these parts, the two sides and this piece together, and then try to fit it on the car. If you find that your side is a little too wide, then what you can do is where I'm pointing there, you can start sanding away on these two edges. This edge here on the left side of the car and on the right side of the car, and you just take little bits off of each side and keep fitting it until the piece actually drops in. If you find that your side is a little too short, you can add to the ends. 10 thousandths, 15 thousandths, whatever you need to add, you can add to that end, and it'll once you paint the car, it'll work out beautifully. So anyway, this is how I did it. This stuff is tough. Like I said before, you really got to work at it to get it to. So I used some fairly aggressive sandpaper. I probably got like 100 grit in there to chew away with this, but you take a little bit off each side, and then just this is the other side. Of course, you have to flip it over and then piece it together. And you can see where the bottom one, the gap was a little narrower than it was on the top one. And you just keep fitting them. And as soon as they fit, then that where I was pointing on these middle pieces, that's where you'll put your super glue. And then you piece it together, and I used a couple of clothespins to hold it. And they fit amazingly well. You should be able to line up all the edges and keep all of this square. It's pretty easy thing to do. Anyway, those of you that have the nailable steel floor, feel free to put that in on the flooring. You can, what I did was I started the one piece towards the middle and worked to the edge, and then the other one I can cut to fit. You may have to cut both pieces if you want to really keep it concentric, but I figure if you get past the door there, nobody's going to see it anyway. The one thing I didn't talk about is on this kit, you could probably make opening doors. I don't bother to do it. I'm not a big fan of opening doors. And it would probably have to be another show, and I'm not gonna, I won't tackle it because I didn't do it on either of these kits. But you might be able to leave out that centerpiece and come up with a way to design an opening where the doors will actually slide in the rails. But like I said, that's probably for another show. Anyway, after these pieces are glued together, this center section on this piece tends to be a little bit thick. And once again, my little pointer's pointing at where it's a little thicker. So what I ended up doing is taking a Dremel with a drum sander on there and grinding that down so that was more even. That way you don't get a bow in the middle of the car. So, all right, then what we're gonna do before we put the sides on, we're gonna make sure the roof pieces will fit. There's little grooves on each end of the car that these the roof goes into. You'll notice there's little knobs on each end and they fit down in there. It may require a little bit of cleanup in there. I'm not sure if the one end here was a little bit off, so I took my rounded blade X-Acto and just kept scraping in there until the roof piece fit down in there. And there you can see where the roof matched up beautifully with the ends. That's what you want. You want that nice level piece. It's going to get covered up with the roofing material here eventually, but you want to make sure that those are even with the ends. And also you may have to shape that little piece a little bit. One of mine wasn't round, it was square. So I had to take a little sanding block and work on that a little bit to round that so it would actually pop down into that configuration. Anyway, there's the roof put together, one of the sides put together. Now, one of the other tricks I did here, I got my pictures out of order. You see this little white strip in the roof. I discovered when you put the roof together, and this is kind of the way it's designed, you'll have to go through and figure out, do you need a 10 thousandths piece in there, 20? I think it'd be rare if the roof actually went together and didn't need anything. John includes a biscuit that goes on the underside. The little raised piece on there is 40 thousandths. Well, I only needed 20 to complete this roof. So I used just regular white styrene and filled in that gap and glued the roof together. Once again, keep it as square as possible, find a straight edge, even an old board or whatever to glue the pieces together. And then you'll, in some of the later pictures here, I'll show you where you trim it up. So once again, there are the sides. You see the roof sitting on top there, getting ready to go. There's a picture. Here I'm showing if you put your sides together on the ends there, it was still just a little bit tight. So I ended up taking a sanding block and just grinding that side down a little bit to get it to actually pop in there like this. Get a good tight fit on that. All right. After you get your side glued on it, if the guys who once again ordered the high-end kit, you can add in the load locks. It's a separate piece that glues in there. Once again, I bought the lesser kit. I did buy one with this in there to demonstrate how those go in, but they fit right up against that door divider block and fit almost perfectly in there. So yeah, there was the 20 thousandths piece I had to put on the roof. So I got my pictures a little out of sequence here, but so I put in 20 thousandths. I was able to glue that in there, and there it is. I got it up against the block there to keep the roof straight, and then started trimming it down. You have to trim along the edges there to make sure the piece. And then here's that piece, that biscuit I was telling you about. That's a 40 thousandths wide piece. It was a little wide for mine, so I just flipped it upside down and still used it to help hold the roof together. It strengthens the roof to put that piece in there. And then you got to trim around these edges to make sure the roof, there's a little notch in the roof where the car sides will actually fit into. So you have to make sure you clear that out of there, whatever styrene you use, if you have to use any at all. Then you decide the roof pieces. Now, the black pieces on top there, that's Pullman's design. They had those pressed panels like that. Probably the others pressed steel. You'll have to figure out which car you want to do, but these smooth ends are probably the other manufacturers. Like I say, I didn't do a lot of research on this, but I do know that Pullman was the one that came up with those pressed panels. But the rest of them are all these X panels. They sometimes will come in varying colors. It really doesn't matter. But what you'll want to notice on these is one edge has a rivet strip The other side does not. So as you start gluing these down, make sure you keep your rivet strips oriented in the right direction so that you got a rivet strip on every panel. Once again, you'll have to take a sanding block and clean those edges up just a little bit. They might have some dimples or little rises here and there. Pretty simple to clean those up. And then you start in the middle of your roof. Put the first panel in right in the middle, and then you start working out towards the edges, adding more of the panels as you go along. And then when you get to the end, you decide whether you want to use that smooth panel or the Pullman style panel, depending upon the car you're building. And there it is with the Pullman on the other end. So you can super glue all those in place, use a straight edge so that the panels don't go back and forth. The last panel you put on there may overhang just a little bit, but that's not an issue. We'll sand that off to be even with the end. So it'll and then the neat part about this kit is the roof can remain removable. It snaps down in there pretty tight. I'm kind of surprised by that, but that works really well. Then we're going to move into the good old center sills. Now John's included, mine came with 3 different sets. You had some center sills that came out, or the draft gear that came straight out of the car with no drop on it whatsoever. And then the ones on the left there have got a kind of the most severe drop that he has available. And then he also included a couple of just extra coupler pockets that can be glued onto these pieces in the middle if you need a lesser drop. And then he's got some that, here's the ones with that's the most extreme offset that he has. And then these are the ones with no offset at all. So once you mount the trucks of your choice on the car, you'll have to decide which of these center sills you're going to need to put in your car. Now I use the Atlas trucks, and they required the offset draft gear. And here's a demonstration showing how the other pieces will slide right into there. So if you need if you need that style, you just slide those in, glue them in. They're not going to be movable. The moving part is the gray piece. That whole draft gear will move, but this coupler pocket slides in there and glues in place. And there it is put in place, just demonstrating how that will look when it's in place. There is a slot right about where the truck screw goes, and that's what the sill will land against, or I keep calling it a sill. That's where the draft gear will land against that screwed when it goes in and out. So it will actually bottom out in both directions. These are the Atlas trucks that I use. They're the 70-ton truck, and it rides much too high. So what I had to do, and I discovered this, now you guys that maybe use Atlas more than I do, I'm a Pro to 48 guy, so I don't use a lot of Atlas trucks for my modeling. But I discovered that you can remove the screws from this piece, and that comes out. And then this is the pin on the truck that needs to be reduced. Well, I discovered you can flip that piece upside down and put it right back in the truck. And then it shows you how much to remove. So I took a Dremel and I put the screws back in, and I took the Dremel and ground that down. So it's even with that bolster. And now I can, with that offset draft gear, my couplers are just about perfect height with these. Yeah, as you can see in the picture here, I'll have to maybe drop the coupler a little more with a spacer in there, but otherwise it should be good to go. And so anyway, everybody start gluing your stuff together. Get the sides put in place. You don't glue the roof on, leave the roof open for now. Later on, if you want to glue it in place, you may, but we'll leave that off for now. But get the sides glued on. You want to make sure they're lined up with your ends. And we'll next week we're going to tackle the old underframe. We're going to put all the piping in, put the brake cylinders, air reservoirs, all of that in place. So that'll be more of a full show than this one. But next week when we get together, you should have the sides on your car, the ends, and the trucks of your choice, and the draft gear slid into place and ready to go. So with that, Jim, I'll turn it back over to you.